Welcome to late August on our little flower farm slash home garden here in New Jersey in Zone 7A. Today we're going to be taking a tour through this space where we're growing a lot of flowers but also vegetables. Now I'm going to be showing you what's in bloom, which honestly things are a little behind. I'm going to talk about lessons that I still continue to learn even in my 4th year of flower farming. I'm going to talk about what's going to be hopefully in bloom next few months and what's in the ground for the spring of next year. Now, one thing you may have noticed as I walk out is that this is no longer fenced in by our prior deer fence. Now that deer fence was something that Eric and I put up, and more recently we had a perimeter fence put up across the entire backyard. So it feels so much more spacious. It has allowed some things to climb and has also taken the work out of me bringing a push lawnmower to mow the perimeter, which has been awesome. But first, let's look at what is blooming. There is one flower right now that I have a complete abundance of, and it is celosia, specifically Selway celosia. This is self-seeded celosia. And the first year when I had bought this from a tray of plugs, they were literally in one location. Throughout the last few years, yes, I did transplant here and there, but this stuff has migrated everywhere. So you can see I have so much of it, and it's one of those things where I really have tried to keep it at bay. It just pops up, and I'll tell you that it always saves my butt. Last week I had done about 8 bouquets for a bridal shower in addition to 6 mason jars. And I'll tell you that the celosia, even though it wasn't a star ingredient, was still pretty important in those bouquets. And this week at the country store, I did sell some straight bunches of bouquets. I marketed it as forever flowers because you can hang them upside down to dry. And of course, they were also in my mixed bouquets. Now, celosia is one of those things that has a pretty large harvest or a pretty long harvest window. And it is one that if you cut, you will have side branches that continue to produce. So I am looking forward to continuing to have celosia over the next few weeks. Now that I've had 4 years of this, I want to get into conversation around, does it make sense to thin or does it make sense to give it some space? And I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. This here is a really good example. So you have singular celosia that comes up and has a little petite head. This is another example. This one got shaded out a bit more, but you can see that in this little space, even though I had actually thinned out celosia, there are just a ton of single stems. Now, I find that this celosia tends to be a little bit more useful, especially in like mason jar work. If you're not looking for something huge and giving perceived value in a bouquet, this is really, really great. But if we go over here, where we've got a few that really had the ability to branch out, and you can see how thick these stalks are compared to a singular one like this one generates a lot of side shoots. And what I like about this one is that if I snip the center, and this one is starting to go to seed, so I would have picked it a little bit earlier, but I get so much more perceived value out of this one stem because it has a bunch of ancillary side shoots that I am starting to favor giving celosia a lot more space because I have all of these side shoots, and that also gives me a longer succession window because once I cut this off, I can wait for the side shoots to mature and continue to harvest, and they will still continue to bloom over the next few weeks. Versus I feel like with something like this, once you cut on it, it's basically one and done. So it might be a bit of a preference thing, but I do try to thin out more since I prefer having the branching stems. Now in this group over here, you're also going to find some zinnias. So this is called Creamy Dahlia Zinnia. In my first year of flower farming, I don't know why, I bought 1,000 of these from Johnny's, like 1,000 in a seed pack. That is way too much. So every year I grow a little, hoping I can use it. And I'll be honest, it's been a little disappointing because most of them are singles. This one is at least a double. Believe it or not, these were put in sometime in June. They got mauled by a couple of Japanese beetles, as you can see on the leaves over here, but then they bounced back because the Japanese beetles really were around for like a week and a half. Our Japanese beetle pressure this year was a lot better. I credit that to having birds in here. You can see that there's a lot of like branching sunflowers that I've just let go to seed. It does attract the birds. So I feel like that's actually really helped with the pressure. But what I am surprised about, and I'm gonna knock on wood right now, is that these haven't gotten powdery mildew yet. So I do wonder if these are a little bit more resistant to powdery mildew. Typically, I can't have zinnias for more than like 6 weeks or else they start getting mildew. And these have been in here for over 2 months and they look great. So I can't cut on them, but at least I know that there are varieties here that can be resistant to powdery mildew. And that's really important to me. I want to come over here to show you back in July, actually, late June, July, I had a farm tour. This is where there were a ton of tall lilies and it shaded out a perennial that I got last year. And this is Hypernicum. And there are, I think, like 4 or 5 plants of Hypernicum in this little small area. And I love it. I love it so much that I would, I think, invest in more Hypernicum in the perimeter areas in the future. But this is finally getting enough sun where it's putting on a lot of growth. I think that if it wasn't shaded out by the lilies earlier in the season, I would be having foliage right now, but it's totally fine because I don't need a foliage until a couple of weeks from now, and we'll talk about why. But you can see what happens is it first develops leaves and then it develops these little flowers, and then once the flowers fade away, you get these little berries, and then the berries, which start out as yellow, end up turning a little bit more pink. And so these are going to take a couple more weeks before they're ready, but you can see how prolific this one plant is. And this is only in year 2, because remember, perennials crawl or creep in year 1, crawl in year 2, and leap in year 3. Is that right? Creep, crawl, leap? I don't know what it's called, but there's a saying about perennials where by year 3, they're supposed to be super, super prolific. So I can't wait to see how crazy they become. We are gonna walk through here, this little mess of an aisle that I have that has a ton of tomatoes interplanted with cosmos. I've got some cherry tomatoes over here which need to be harvested, but these cosmos are insane. You can see that there's a lot of side shoots off of a singular stem. Let me show you how thick it is. This is the thickness of that single stem. It's even helping stake a tomato plant on here. But the good news is that I do get to use these for cuts. And like this is the double click variety, which I absolutely love, that is growing over here. So this whole plant has kind of leaned to the side and it's been kind of hard to stake it back up, but it has provided support for the zucchini over here. And yeah, this is a little bit of a mess, but it works. There's actually a shishito pepper plant over here that's been producing really well. I cleaned up a little bit of this area, believe it or not. There's more cosmos over here. There's even a plant called a cucamelon over here, which is like a little cucumber plant. I think it comes from Mexico. I've grown it in the past in a townhouse. Hasn't borne any fruit yet. I've got some watermelon that's self-seeded. So we already brought a watermelon back in. And then there's another watermelon that's growing over here. So that's really exciting. And there's a baby watermelon over here. I don't know if that's going to be ready by the time the season is over. But watermelon is one of those really tricky crops for me because I never know when to harvest it. It's like cantaloupe, which I'll show you a little bit later. But last year I opened up a few and they were just not ripe enough. So I've erred on the side of caution and really given it some time. So hopefully the one that I harvested will be ready for us to eat. There's just a lot of intercropping over here. Some more self-seeded celosia that's popped up. There is some Swiss chard. Swiss chard has been delightfully an MVP of this summer, especially for ease feeds. This stuff, I've had some chard It's a very specific variety that has bolted, but most of them have not bolted at all. In the past, I've only had year 2 chard bolt because it is a biannual, but these have done really well. And it's one of those crops that I think I'm going to grow more of next year. I'm going to buy some other colors. This is all the pinks, obviously. But what I like about it is that they're a little bit more pest resistant than some of the kale that you'll see later. You can see we've got a ton of peppers. They're still green right now, so I think they're going to start coloring up soon. Fun fact, if you didn't know, all bell peppers, whether they're yellow, red, or orange, actually come from green bell peppers, and it's allowing them to stay on the plant for a longer duration that lets them color up. And so I actually think bell peppers sold at the grocery store are sold for a very decent price, because let me tell you, these guys take forever to grow. We've got some tomatoes here. This is a San Marzano. No blossom end rot, which is good. So I gotta harvest these because we freeze these to make sauce. So that's the tomato aisle, but I want to show you some other flowers that are in bloom, including these cosmos. So again, this is the cranberry double click. This is a different kind of pink cosmo. And again, like we've got about 4 or 5 plants over here, and they've just been really great in terms of helping me fill out some of the bouquets. Now here's the thing, my Lisianthus are basically done. I do not have another focal right now. A part of it is I seeded a lot of zinnias and sunflowers. For the first time ever, I had disease on my sunflowers, so I literally just ripped them out earlier. And the zinnias are still kind of coming in, but there is one that started coming in, and the color is completely not the color that I was expecting. In fact, it's this color. This is like canary yellow. I do have seed for canary yellow, but that is not the seed I put in here. So I have no idea what happened. I don't think it's the end of the world if these are the ultimate zinnias that I get, because we are headed into fall and this is at least a fallish color. It can pair well with, you know, like the pinks that I have over here, including the purples, but a little disappointing, including the fact that I don't have a significant amount of sunflowers, although I have been able to harvest off of the branching sunflowers like that over there. Now the necks tend to be a little bit more weak, so you do have to be careful, but I've had some usable stems from there. So I don't really have a great big focal, nor do I have dahlias this year. And I'll be honest, I need to grow dahlias next year, because even though I have mums, the mums, this is actually kind of getting into the next part of the video, which is what's coming in the next few weeks. The mums still look like this. The mums look great. I mean, they look fantastic. They are up to my waist and they look really, really healthy. This is one plant that has like, I don't know, like 8 different shoots coming out with more shoots on top of the 8, but they're not gonna flower until probably late September. So I have this focal gap that I never had an issue with over the last few years because I grew dahlias. And so lesson learned, I do need some dahlias, which is a little bit sad because I hate digging them up. I hate doing all that. So I might even experiment next year where I only grow from seed and kind of take the chance. But I do think that there's a place for dahlias that are singles, that are not balls in a bouquet. And so just having a little bit more of that flexibility to be able to have a great crop like a dahlia that is honestly so reliable once you start getting into like later August. So dahlias would be blooming right now if I had them. There's definitely a part of me that regrets not having dahlias, but it is what it is. So this aisle is actually where one of the Lisianthus rows was. And you can see that now the Lisianthus are gone. The mums are really, really starting to bush out over here. So we've got quite a bit of mums. I'm not scared of not having enough focals. At that time, I'm actually a little bit more concerned about not having enough filler or ancillary flowers, but I do have 9 bark in our landscaping that I could use, and hopefully there will still be some celosia. There is one extra flower that is blooming right now. It is on its 2nd flush, and it is this Rudbeckia. I had some more red types of Rudbeckia before over here, and I took them out and put them into landscaping because they're nice to have, they're nice to cut on if I need them, but I would like to prioritize having these types over here. And so I have been able to use a few stems in my mixed bouquets this week. Hopefully I'll still get some longer stems, but really not expecting to cut much out of here. I have also been getting delphinium throughout the entire season. It's not as strong, but there are stems that pop up here and there. And as you can see, this entire row has been shaded out by, I think it's a zucchini, but some of them look like butternut squash. So I'm still trying to figure out what it is, but I have actually liked the shade because it's allowed me to do a little bit more intercropping. So for example, there's some didiscus over here, and this is a bit of an experiment to see if I can get this blue lacy flower blooming over the next few weeks and get longer stems by using the shade. There's a bit of an experiment going on over here because last year I got a few plugs. They went in late July and I did get flowers, but they were out in full sun. So I've put some in the shade over here, which they are stretching out. But I also have a couple over here, which have a bit more of the full sun. And you can see they haven't stretched out as much. And even this one is starting to bud up. And this is obviously way too short, but I'm experimenting and seeing if it is possible to get didiscus this time of year, because typically people here grow it for the spring. So here's another one. This one's a lot more bushier. Here's another one that's budding up, and I wonder if I cut it, am I going to be able to stimulate a little bit more growth and delay it so that it could bloom sometime in September for me. All right, so now let's talk about what's coming over the next few weeks. I had put in quite a few trays of seedlings that I had bought, and I had ordered these back in May. So I had this mindset of succession planting. A couple of things went wrong. There was one tray that had to fail, so I got a refund. And it was bells of Ireland, and that was an experiment to see if I can get them for the fall. Those plugs, they still sent them to me because they thought they could be of use to me, but they, like, something happened and they just look like they got fried. So the best bells of Ireland right now, they look like this, which isn't that bad, but I just don't think there's enough time left in the season. We're in late August. First frost is usually mid to late October. So I don't realistically know how much time these are going to get to be able to bulk up and actually have any usable stems, but I do think they have a possibility of overwintering. The good news though is that I do have one row of a flower that should be blooming soon. And believe it or not, it's celosia. I'm laughing because I felt like that I had so much celosia that I didn't want any more celosia, but I wanted a different kind of celosia. So this is called super crest celosia, and it's supposed to be a crest, which is hard to tell here, but you can see that there's a little bit more of like a rectangle at the top than the sharp plume. Now here's the thing about celosia. It is best when it is direct seeded into the ground. However, my personal experience is that I can never get the dang thing to have a good germination rate. If I throw down 50 seeds, I'll get like 2 or 3 that pop up. Case in point is last year I grew dusty rose celosia from Floret and had a pretty terrible germination rate. So what I usually do is I let it self-seed. Now last year I did collect some, but some did self-seed, and this is what it looks like. So I'm gonna take the ones that I don't like, use it and cut flowers, and I'm gonna keep the ones like this one that I really like, and I'm just going to let it go and let it self-seed and have a party. I also try to grow spun candy, put that in the ground. It's actually somewhere over there, like out of 50 seeds, 3 germinated this year. So one of the things that I do with celosia is I have this expectation that if I direct seed in year 1, I'm not gonna have a lot, but in future years, I'm gonna have some. Another good example is this is flamingo feather. I tried to grow this in year 1. It didn't get a lot and let it go. And now I have flamingo feather for life. A lot of people struggle with flamingo feather because it looks a little bit more white than pink, but all you have to wait is for cooler weather and it will start getting pink. And a really good illustration here is that this part is a bit more shaded, and you can definitely see that there's more pink tips on here. The thing I don't like about flamingo feather is that the harvest window is definitely shorter in quotation marks, because you could still totally use this. In fact, when I used to sell at the co-op to florists, they would still sell this one. I don't like the look at this. I just feel like that this celosia starts creating that cylindrical dryness. Like this is it going to seed a lot more quickly than even something like a celosia. So nothing wrong with flamingo feather. I have it, I like having it, but I don't think it's something I would actually seek to grow in the future. Anyway, so I have a lot of supercrest celosia. I know I'm gonna be able to harvest many for stems this year, but part of the goal is to allow it to self-seed in this area so that I can have a sea of different kind of celosia next year. I had planned on doing a little bit of a celosia experiment this year like I did with stock. I have all these different kinds of celosia seeds, but I actually didn't have the space. And especially after having ordered this, I didn't want to have like a bazillion celosias. So I'm going to save the seeds for next year and do that experiment. But I do think that some of these are really pretty. Like I really like this color. I like this habit, and hopefully we're going to get a lot more that feel bigger and can make a statement in a bouquet in a way that the cell weight can't. Alongside with supercrest, I have some stock. And so last year I planted stock around July 4th and it was successful, but I felt like I got it a little bit too early. I got it around this time last year and I was like, I'd like to push it back a bit. So I waited 2 more weeks and then these got put in about probably, we'll call it mid to late July. This is what they look like right now. They look pretty decent, but I give it another month before they bloom. And some of them are a little bit further along. Some of them are less further along. The major difference between this year and last year was this year we had a great amount of rain throughout the season until mid-July. Literally when these went in, we started having no rain. And then last year we had a dry spell for like June going to July. And when I started putting in plugs for the fall, we had great rain. So I do think that that also expedited their growth. And again, things that you continue learning. You think you can time things and just use last year as an example. You got to take into account rain patterns, heat, and all that good stuff. But anyway, I feel like I have a high likelihood of getting stock sometime in September. And this is the main row. Now, I also put in an additional round of plugs 2 weeks ago. And this is the biggest lesson learned for me, that shame on me as a 4th-year flower farmer. I should have known better. That was honestly a little too late. I think that in the future, the last possible date I can put in plugs is probably maybe the 1st week of August, but to be safe, the last week of July. So this is Stocks, S-T-O-X stock. And this one over here is quartet stock. Quartet stock tends to be more heat tolerant, which is why I ordered in July. This is the one that I grew last year with success, despite it going in during the height of the heat of the summer. I have never grown stocks in the heat, so this is a bit of a trial, but luckily it did get a bit of rain. I'm hoping maybe I'll get something in October. We'll see. This is actually still quartet, but it wasn't shaded. So you can see there's a difference between when you use shade cloth over here. These are much further along, and these did not have any shade cloth because I ran out. I mean, they're looking fine. They're just gonna take a little bit longer, and at least they didn't die. Here is my other row of Zinnias, which is pretty much done at this point. There are some like straggler stems. I don't know why they are so far behind, but I've repurposed a part of this area for snapdragons. These also went in about 2 weeks ago. And again, these are an experiment. I've never grown these varieties. One of them is Maryland Cool Orange, I think it's called. And another one's Avignon Deep Rose. But these guys are, I mean, they're doing well right now. But I do worry whether or not they're going to have enough time to put on blooms. So one of the things that I'm doing here is I intercropped it with Zinnias because I do plan on putting a tunnel over here. So I just got some low cat tunnels from Neversink. Decided to splurge on that because it's just good quality. And even though I can probably make a version for myself for a little bit cheaper, like I'm at a point where I'm trying to trade money for time. But the thing about growth this time of year is not just heat and whether or not you can keep the soil warm, it's also day length. So things tend to not flower at all once you get below 10 hours, but there are some things that are more long day sensitive versus short day. These are luckily short day, meaning that they flower and they're more likely to bloom when the days are less than a certain hours of sunlight per day. So at least I got the group right, but this is really pushing it in terms of seeing whether or not I'll have flowers for October. Now, the reason why I want to have flowers for October is one, I anticipate my mums will still be actually going strong then, but two, here's a new crop that I'm trialing. This is ornamental kale. So I bought 2 trays of ornamental kale, and there's 2 reasons for it. One is because I heard you can densely plant it. So you can tell they are pretty densely planted. Some of them actually dried out because of the heat that we had, and I didn't get a chance to water this area as much. So that's why you see some snaps in here. But I have been trying to come through and strip the lower petals a bit to give it some space. The other reason why I ordered it was because I figured if I needed to, when I strip these, I can actually put these into E's feed, since we do a blenderized tube diet for her a bit, just to supplement some of the stuff that she's eating by mouth, since no 2.5-year-old really will eat a lot of vegetables for you. So the irony is that I have a ton of kale. The kale is the last vegetable that I need to supplement for her, but I'm really excited to see how this does for flowers. And of course, it'd be nice to pair ornamental flower with something like a stock, as well as a snapdragon. So we'll see what happens, but at the minimum, these are growing really well. These plugs came in week of July 17th. So it's been a little bit over a month. They were really small when they first came in, and they look really great right now. I have another area where I have some of this because, again, like, I'm always trying to experiment and see how they do under certain conditions. This, I would call it full sun. I even have some more, I think, in here, which is really shaded underneath the canopy of the zucchini. And I think these guys are probably not going to go anywhere if I keep the zucchini. So you can see over here, in fact, I think they're even getting eaten. So anyway, the zucchini plant will have limited days because I have so many zucchini that I really don't need anymore. In fact, as I'm doing this video, I see like 10 zucchinis on this plant. Those are the main flowers that I have left. I have some more stock over here. There's some direct seeded stuff that I have, like cosmos, that are pretty small right now. You can definitely tell that things are slowing down in terms of timing because it's definitely gotten cooler. We actually had like nights in the 50s. I'm wearing a sweatshirt in the morning, but perhaps one of the most exciting new crops I have this year is honeydew. Look at this. This is Jenny's melon. Sorry, this is not honeydew. This is cantaloupe. I keep on getting it confused. This one's called Jenny's melon, and it's like zucchini. It is so prolific. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's more here, like 8, 9 over here. So if you like cantaloupe, perhaps you should try it. And I have the same issue where I already harvested 2 way too early. So now I'm waiting a little bit longer, and we'll see if at least one of these honeydew melons will be right. Finally, let's talk about next season, because one of the things that I did really well in year 1 going to year 2 was overwintering, especially trying to get spring flowers that was basically bridging that gap between, we'll call it like peony season and the July 4th season. So we're looking at coverage between like late May through the month of June here in the Northeast. And so back in year 1 going to year 2, I overwinter things like rudbeckia, feverfew, campanula, or the bellflower. What else did I overwinter? I overwintered yarrow, sea holly. So the yarrow and sea holly have been mainstays here, but I did rip up all the sweet William that I also overwintered. And sweet William is the first flower that blooms on this farm. And I can actually get oh my God, I just swallowed a gnat. I can actually get an early enough crop for Mother's Day. So doesn't look very impressive, but this is the current sweet William. So I started these from seed in soil blocks, killed a bunch of them because I forgot to water, but enough of them have remained that they are still here. So you can see that we hopefully will have Sweet William for the spring. Now, the other thing that I am growing, which is related, is carnations. Also in this bed over here, this is Mum's Lysianthus that are done. I'm growing these French Chabad, I think it's called, carnations. These fared a lot better in the soil block, and the goal is also to potentially put a tunnel over this, but TBD actually, because I only have enough for like 2 rows, and I'm deciding between this and potentially like ranunculus and anemones. But the goal is to have these sometime in the spring of next year. Never grew these. Local farm by me grew these for the first time this year, really liked it. I had a co-op fellow flower farmer last year who grew them, saw them in person, loved them, so decided to also try it. This over here just looks like a mess, but this used to be sunflowers. I let these are Taki Sunrich sunflowers that I let stay for over a month after they were done for the birds, and they provided shade. My goal was to trial fall ranunculus. So you can see that there are definitely ranunculus sprouts, except they took about 4 weeks to sprout. Way too late. I don't think these are going to bloom in time. Ranunculus are long day plants, meaning that they tend to initiate blooms when the photo period or the day length has at least 13 hours of sunlight. It doesn't mean that they can't initiate buds when we have fewer hours of daylight, but they're more likely to when there's more. Lesson learned here is that if I want to attempt to do fall ranunculus, I should pre-sprout them indoors. And again, this is a reflection of the month where there really just was no rain. And you can tell I don't have irrigation out here. I do have a philosophy of if you make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. And over time, I learn what tends to make it out here and what doesn't. So there's a consequence, right? We are seeing some more sprouts come out. Like you can see there's one over here, one over there. And now that I've taken out the sunflowers, there is a lot more room for them to put on more growth. And I am seeing that speed of growth be a little bit faster. There's some more snapdragons over here where I overflowed before. And I'm hoping that if I keep these stalks in, they might help with a little bit of support. And if needed, I could always put netting through the sunflower stalks. I like to keep roots in the ground where possible, especially sunflowers, because they have such deep roots. The roots are, believe it or not, still living. There's still activity underneath the soil. So it does benefit the plants that are going in to have those roots in the ground. There's a lot of exchange of microbial activity happening between the old roots and the new roots. There's actually data to support this. So where possible, I do try to keep them in. This is the first time I've actually successfully sprouted this amount of carrots. These are all carrots, by the way. I felt like I put in a lot more seeds because I was like, I'm gonna have to thin it out if it all comes to fruition. But typically I have a hard time sprouting carrots. So I don't know what changed here, but at least we'll get some carrots. And I haven't showed you all the vegetables that we've had. We've had a ton of tomatoes. We have a ton of butternut squash, and I had an epiphany today because I was like, how do I have butternut squash if I never bought butternut squash seeds? And I've never grown it before. This here's a butternut squash. I accidentally harvested one too early, which by the way, if you do, you can still use it like zucchini. It's totally fine. But I came to this epiphany that my neighbor gave me his butternut squash because we compost our food. I think this literally has been growing from the compost that I've been spreading on. So hence why now we have a lot of butternut squash, which isn't the end of the world because this stuff holds really, really well. Last but not least, the final crop I'm gonna overwinter are in these trays and hopefully they will germinate. This is Campanula. I really like the Campanula that I had a couple of years ago. It was in a deeper blue. So this time I'm doing a lavender as well as a rose color. And one of the things I want to talk about is me finally pulling the plug and getting these high quality trays. These are wind strip trays, which mimic soil blocking. And I've kind of just had this come to Jesus moment with soil blocking, where it's one of those things you try to make it work and it's just not working, but you try so hard and finally you realize that it's just not worth it. Soil blocking works for me when I use the medium-sized blocker, but it takes freaking forever to get the soil together and put it into the soil blocker. And it also takes up a lot of space. The problem with the mini soil blocker is that I either forget to water it, or I find that it gets harder to transplant because you gotta really make sure that you can nurture it and get the roots really going, or else the blocks crumble on you. So for those reasons, I opted for 72 cell trays. These are from Never Sink Farms. I don't have any affiliation with them whatsoever, but I like the fact that the trays mimic the concept of soil blocking, which prevents root balling, or whatever you call it, like roots circling the tray from happening. And it also alleviates the stress of needing to make sure that they're watered all the time, because I also got this heavy duty tray. I bought these in bulk, but each tray runs about $9-ish. The tray on the bottom also runs the same. So you're talking about like a $20 investment per set. And I did buy 10 of each. So it was a pretty decent amount of investment, but it is one of those things where I think about the amount of time I've spent on soil blocking, and it just doesn't make any sense for me to go forward. Now, that being said, filling these trays up took more time than I had expected, and it's because there's these little holes over here. So if you have any tips on how to fill these without getting an extra attachment, please let me know, because it is more of a time suck than I thought it would be in terms of filling the tray. So I thought I would save time by both not having to do the soil blocking itself, but also less watering. And I'm finding that I'm only cutting time really on the watering piece versus on this piece. So Campanula takes a little bit of time to germinate, 7 to 14 days on the back of the packet. I really hope these germinate, because also the seeds were pelleted and they weren't super expensive. They also weren't super cheap, but hopefully we get something out of these. If there's anything to take away from this video, is that I am still constantly learning. I'm still learning how to time, still learning how to perfect this fall season of blooms. And it just feels like that one year you might accidentally get it right and you think you know what you're doing, but really the next year when you try to plan using what happened last year, it doesn't work out. But that's just all a part of farming. But anyway, this August was actually really great for me so far, because I had so many sales related to Zinnias. So if you missed this video, I highly recommend watching that, because I do talk about just how much money I made around Zinnias, the business case for them, how to make them profitable. But let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, how you're overwintering things, whether or not you're also pushing the envelope on trying to get blooms towards the later part of the season, and I'll see you in the next video.